Welcome to the Agent Bridge podcast. We're your hosts, Brandon Baca.
And I'm Marl Hessen.
The Agent Bridge is the proven path to real estate success without the burnout. I am, I say this, I think, before every episode, but I am really excited for our guest today. We're going to talk about emotional intelligence with Dr. Seth Hickerson. So, Dr. Hickerson is an innovative educator, coach, entrepreneur, multi-branch military veteran. Seth has been training high-performing individuals such as professional athletes, Navy SEALs, and business executives for the last 15 years. Seth is an expert in the implementation of mindfulness, emotional intelligence, cognitive fitness, and resiliency training. He is dedicated to providing access to practical tools, tips, and techniques that enhance self and situational awareness, reduce stress, and improve performance. And in addition to that, he is a good friend of mine. So, Dr. Hickerson, Seth, welcome, man. I'm glad to have you.
Welcome.
Yeah, man. Glad to hear. I always good to see. And I tell everybody after, my bio is read, I'm like, all right, now everybody just lower your expectations. Right? We'll get real, we'll get honest. That's all the good fun
I
stuff.
mean, the bio, I will say the bio is fantastic.
Yeah.
It's solid. It's pretty impressive. I've been around a few places, but it's awesome. It's always good to see you, Brandon, and chat.
You as well, my friend.
I'm always down to help you and your crew out.
Thank you, brother.
So
I appreciate
good to be here.
I was thinking about Happy New Year, and I was thinking about, as we're prepping for this episode, it's like, one of the things that I tend to align with people who are either like veterans, professional athletes, like people like that, who have sort of like stared down the gates of hell in a way, right? Like basically embrace situations where there's inevitable failure, and choose to do it anyway. And, it's one of the reasons I align with RL. It's one of the reasons that I connect with you is because, there's a reality, to staring down inevitable failure. There's a reality to staring down, scenarios where, hey, look, there's no way that I'm going to win here, but let me go ahead and do this anyway. So I think that's one of the reasons that we initially connected, whether it's, again, veterans, athletes, civil service, EMTs, paramedic, like firemen, policemen, whatever. Mm-hmm. I tend to connect with those people for that reason. So anyway, I think that's one of the reasons that we connected initially, because I think it's easy to be positive when you haven't had to sort of face some of the reality of the darkness of life and sort of come out and make choices to elevate. And so anyway, that said, I just
certainly puts
grateful.
Everything in perspective.
It puts things in perspective. And the reason, Seth, that we are having you here today is because, we've talked about this over the last several weeks. There are so many real estate agents that have come into the business or have been in the business for a while, either way. And they're facing down this inevitability of a shifting market. There's still money to be made. There's still success to be had in the real estate industry, but it's different, and it's going to require an elevated sense of basically the topic of this conversation, which is emotional intelligence. Like, how are we going to, elevate personally to create the same success that we had in the last couple of years when it was sort of coming out of the woodwork?
Right.
But anyway, before we go ahead, what were we going to say?
On the heels of the best market that we've maybe ever seen
in history,
feels very drastic.
Yeah,
the change feels very drastic. So
exactly,
now more than ever, it's important to think about emotional intelligence and how you deal with it.
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
So can we talk about, just like for people who haven't heard the term emotional intelligence, Seth, can you kind of give us your synopsis of that?
Yeah, absolutely. And the one term that I think you're probably familiar with, since you've been through our training and being a military guy, there's one term that kind of really encapsulates everything you just said with what's going on. And it's what emotional intelligence allows people to do. And it's embrace the suck, right?
Yeah.
You got to learn how to embrace the suck. And that's all we do in the military. We train the military. I don't know if there's other veterans out there, but I'm a veteran. Most of our coaches are veterans, and a lot of them from the special ops community. And people hear things like emotional intelligence or mindfulness and whatever, and they think it's this soft set of skills and it's woo woo, and it's not. It's what the elite do
Yeah.
every day to learn how to be emotionally intelligent so that they can embrace sucks.
Yeah.
Because life's going to throw things at you that you don't have any control over, and the thing that separates those from those that do from those that want to do is people emotionally intelligent people have the ability to embrace the suck. And what that means is they have the ability to perceive opportunities in threats,
Yeah.
right? I can see something coming that I don't want to. That's what embracing the suck in the military. That's what that means. It just means I've got to do something I don't want to do, but I
Mhm.
know it's going to make me better.
Right.
If something just sucks, that's not what we want. Don't just go do something. But embracing the suck means I'm going to have to lean into something. I'm going to have to push through something that's going to be difficult, that's going to be hard, that's going to suck. But I know if I do that at the end, it's going to be worth it, right?
Yeah. And
And so
yeah. Go ahead.
so go ahead.
No, please.
No, so just, it's easy to say embrace the suck, and this is what separates, and this is what it all comes down to. It's easy to say, oh, just embrace the suck, but who are the people that are actually going to do it? And people that have been through multiple sucks throughout their life, like I have, and I know you have, and a lot of the people that you mentioned earlier that are accustomed to getting beat down and failing and getting back up. And that just it takes you to a different level in life to where you start to kind of look for those sucks, right? Like, yeah, I can't wait for that next recession. I can't wait for that downturn in the market. That's my time, right?
Yeah, that's
And
right.
we'll talk about how that happens through mastery of emotional intelligence
Yeah,
in
I
just a
have this
second.
joke. I
Jim.
have this joke that RL and I do this to RL all the time, or I do to my kids all the time because listen, life, when you're going through life, you're gonna have things to complain about or whatever. And so my kids will say, hey, it's really hot today. And I'll say, well, where it was hot. And they'll go, the war.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
they're
Right.
like, this food's terrible. I was like, where the food was terrible. So
Yeah.
I always, but there is some truth in like, in the idea that things are hard, but once you've embraced that, like, okay, what difficulty really is, like, if you can sort of go, all right, whatever difficulty that I'm going through, whatever challenge I'm going through, there's an
Right.
amount of this that can become a new set point for what difficulty really is, which
Mhm.
also swings the other way in terms of success. It's like, look, if you can sort of embrace this part of the pendulum, right, and go, all right, look, it's like yes, you can be mad, frustrated, emotional about it, but it's like, okay, well, what is there to learn from this experience that's going to take me to new heights um, in my emotional life and or in my mental life?
Right. Right. It's one of the things me, I have a lot of sayings and slogans and stuff I say, but from a regardless of what industry you're in, just in life in general, one of my favorite things is, if you want life to be hard, do the easy things.
Yeah.
If you want life to be easy, do the hard things.
Mm.
And that's just what it comes down to, and everybody wants to be a successful agent. Everybody wants to be a thriving entrepreneur. Everybody wants to be XYZ, right? But
Right.
it's they don't know how to get out of their comfort zone, right? Because fear is that's the first thing. If you look at a comfort zone and map it out, there's fear. That's what's right outside of it. And nobody
Yeah.
wants to, they're too worried about what other people think. They're too concerned about, the uncomfortable, the uncomfortable piece of stepping out. But it comes down to doing it, right? And the thing that I help people understand is all that stuff, whatever it is you're trying to push through, it's all a result of your mindset,
Yeah.
and that's where cognitive fitness and the stuff I teach and preach comes in is you have to learn how to train mentally, to understand how to embrace sucks, to learn how to improve your emotional intelligence, to control your thoughts and your breath and all the stuff that's going to be required to push through difficult things.
Yeah.
And that's just what most people have never learned how to do and have never had access to. And so it makes it very difficult to
Yeah.
embrace sucks and to see the opportunity and threats when you don't have what it takes.
Yeah. Totally. So I
Mhm.
want to go backwards just a little bit. Can you give me like a little bit of your history and how you chose this particular path? Because it's very unique, right? To
Yeah.
basically choose to coach people on their mental cognitive health and ability. So
Yeah.
what sort of spurred that on for you?
Yeah. So kind of, it all comes back to a lot of sucks throughout my
Yeah.
life. But really my kind of quick story is, I'm from Southern Indiana, small town guy. I grew up being an athlete from, age 5 on, and I was always playing sports, football, basketball, baseball. And sports teach you a lot about how to
Yeah.
embrace sucks and overcome. And so I'm a huge advocate of sports. My boys play and stuff, but I tell kind of growing up all through high school and stuff, I was a really good athlete, but I was a shithead kid, you
Yeah.
know. So in high school, I was that kid that could go be hungover and high and show up to a baseball game and still go 3 for 4 with a home run and 4 RBIs. And
Yeah.
and I literally, my first day of high school, I asked my guidance counselor, I was like, what do I need to be eligible to play sports? She said a 2.0. So I said, all right, that's what you're going to get, a 2.0, and because in my mind, I was just going to go play college, and pro baseball was my best sport. And like I said,
Right.
I had the fanfare and the talent, but mentally I didn't have it. I didn't know how to manage my emotions on and off the field. And so, long story short, what happened was I had some scholarship opportunities for baseball, and I basically drank myself out of them.
Wow.
So ended up graduating high school, no scholarship, no plan B, 2.0 GPA, drinking problem, and here you go. There you go. Enjoy the life, and that's what's happening to a lot of kids that come out of school, right?
Yeah.
And the first thing that happened, and so you'll learn more. My doctorate's in educational leadership, and so one of the big problems we have in mental health, and what happened to me was when that happened, I lost my identity,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And so I went from being this kind of athlete all my life, and then now I'm not an athlete. I don't have any more sports. I don't have any more opportunities. I don't have any direction. I'm not going to college. I don't have any career, and so I just had nothing. And so I fell into one of my first like deep dark depressions. Like once that identity was gone, and we're not teaching kids about identity in school, sadly, by design. And we'll talk more about that maybe in this episode or another one.
Yeah.
So I was in that pity party for about a year, um, where a lot of people wind up, and but eventually after a year of kind of just being mad at the world and working dead end jobs and drinking myself into oblivion, I was finally like, I need to do something. So I joined the military, and I joined the Navy, and I was a CB. If anybody out there knows what
Yeah.
Navy CBs are, so Combat Construction Battalion, and my first duty station was Tokyo, Japan. So at age 19, I moved from small town Indiana to Tokyo, Japan, and I lived in Tokyo for 3 years. And this was
Wow.
almost 25 years ago. And living in Tokyo, I, you know, was just living there, being a soldier, doing my thing, and still struggling with a lot of the stuff I struggled with. But just by living over there, I started to get introduced to things like mindfulness,
Mhm.
contemplative practice, meditation, Zen life, just things that they do in Asia to really deal with their emotions and stress, things they've been
Yeah.
doing for thousands of years. And so I started trying some of it out, and I kind of got into it. Kind of liked the meditation stuff and the mindfulness and some of the things from, grounded in Buddhism and things from just living in Tokyo for a few years. And again, this was way before it was hip and trendy or cool or
Yeah.
whatever,
Right. Yeah.
and just was trying to deal with my own stuff, and it was kind of working a little bit. So kind of got that unique exposure. And then I moved to Spain. So then I lived on the coast of Spain for a year and wrote in Rota, and living in Europe and on the coast of Spain, I got exposed to how they deal with emotions and stress, very laid back, very,
Mhm.
a lot of siestas, like none of their buildings have office hours. Like you never know when the hell something's going to be open.
Right.
You know, it's just
Yeah.
very, yeah. And so,
Mhm.
I went from like, so I just had this unique worldview, and the thing that I realized the most was every time I would come back to the United States from living in Europe or Asia, even back to my little small hometown, I could just feel the tension and the stress and the
Yeah.
anxiety here. Everybody was just pissed off, agitated,
Yeah.
and I was always like, man, it's just everybody's exhausted and tight and pissed off here in this little town with 20,000. I want to go back to the city with 13 million where it's peaceful,
Right.
you know? And so that was when I first had a perspective of like, I love this country, been in the military, supported, defended it, etc. We do a lot of things really well, but the one thing we do absolutely awful is emotions and
Yeah.
mental health, and
That's interesting. I had a very similar experience. I was in Athens with a friend, uh, in Athens, Greece, with a friend this past September, and it was so funny because first of all, he was there to do some work, and so we were around people who were living and working there, and their workday's 3 hours, uh,
yeah,
and then they're done, right? And then there's
right,
there's lunch, at like 2 p.m. There's a siesta, and
Hmm.
then their evening starts at 8 o'clock. But I remember the distinct difference. And by the way, uh, there's a reason that America is economically healthy, right?
Oh yeah,
So
right, right.
I'm not saying that like,
No,
but like from an economics perspective, but from a mental health perspective, it's like I remember being back in the airport and being around Americans and how I could feel the
yeah,
tension being back
yeah,
around
yep.
the American people because it's like, hey, what's happening? What are we doing? It's like you could feel like there's
Yeah,
like a resonance a little bit where you're
well,
going, okay,
that's called limbic. You know,
moving
limbic
around here, stretching.
resonance is
Yeah,
yeah, limbic resonance is what that term is, where you can
right.
literally feel people's energy that's coming off, and that's part of when we talk about emotional intelligence.
Yeah,
One of the superpowers is you're going to learn how to not only control your own energy
yeah,
in chaotic situations, but you can control other people's energy. So everything comes down to energy, and NASA is one of our clients. And that's why NASA loves what we do so much because it's science backed, it's data tracked, and it's all about energy.
yeah,
And that's the ultimate thing is learning how to control, protect our energy, other people's energy as a performance tool. So, but yeah, back to kind of finishing out. So I had that unique worldview. Went back to college, sobered up, went to rehab right out of the Navy. That was my first stop. I said I got to go get this drinking under control,
yep,
and so did that. And then I was kind of off and running and went to undergrad, did health and physical education, but I took an elective class because I thought I wanted to teach and coach. I was like, I want to teach, high school sports, coach, or teach, health and PE, coach high school sports. That's what I thought I wanted to do. So used my GI Bill, went back to Indiana. But as a sophomore, I took an elective class on sports psychology. And, this was 20 something years ago. I'd never heard of that. I never heard of sports psychology and I was interested in it. So I got into class and instantly I kind of understood it because I knew how to train mentally. Like I kind of understood the concept of training mentally. So it clicked. But the bigger thing was I was pissed off because I was
yeah,
in that class and I was like, wait, where was sports psychology, back when I was in high school? Why wasn't somebody teaching me how to
mm,
manage my emotions on and off the field? Maybe I would have gone on and, pursued my goal of playing college or pro ball. And then so I pursued sport psych and I went to the University of Tennessee or I did my master's there and focused on sports psychology. And when you get in it, you learn that sports psychology is not for 14-year-old kids in Bedford, Indiana.
yeah,
It's for the pros, the elite, the top tier. That's who it's for. And so that's when I kind of had that entrepreneurial vision, and I was like, well, screw that. Like that's not why I'm here. I'm here because I want to help the Seth Hickersons. I want to help the 14-year-old kids that have potential but don't know how to manage emotions, X, Y, Z. And so that's when I had the first idea for my first company, which was called Boost Mental Toughness and Leadership.
hmm,
And that was the goal, was to bring legitimate, I don't just do sports psychology like what I've done based on my world experience and military experience. I call it cognitive fitness. So
right,
cognitive fitness is a blend of sports psychology, contemplative practice, neuroscience and neurology, military resilience. So it's a blend of all the things that I've kind of been exposed to and that I've used to train people. But I wanted to make it available, affordable, and scalable to high school kids and athletes and college athletes that would never have a chance to do it. So, also, I went to Richmond, Virginia after grad school. I did my doctorate in educational leadership. So, with that, I studied educational systems, educational models. I learned how to create curriculum and curriculum that can be measured and XYZ. And so, anyway, I just had all this knowledge and skills, and I'd been training high performing people, athletes, military special ops, but ultimately I wanted to create something for, normal people to learn how to do it. And so that's what I
right,
did with the first company and created Boost Mental Toughness and Leadership. And again, this was 7 or 8 years ago now. It was way ahead of its time. Nobody was talking about training mentally or proactive
mhm,
training. And we're for profit. Schools didn't want to pay for it. Everybody wanted it free, and I was like, oh, "This isn't free. Sorry." But
yeah,
we were able to get into some schools, but excuse me, we pivoted just to stay alive as a business because we had to sell something to see what other industries we could get into that could benefit from learning how to reduce stress, improve performance. And we got into pretty much every market we tried to get into, whether it was
yeah,
healthcare, law enforcement, sales, real estate.
mhm,
But then and everything we do is mental health. I tell people, mental health, there's two sides, just like physical health. There's mental health treatment and there's mental health training.
mhm,
Most people in our country don't know anything about proactive mental health training. We just kind of force everybody into treatment to perpetuate that economic goal, right? Of
Right.
hyper capitalism, and we can save that for another talk. But that's the reality of the situation. So when COVID hit, being a guy that works in this field, I knew how they were handling COVID and the way it was going down. That mental health in our country was going to go from shitty to really, really shitty.
Yeah.
And
Right.
like the worst it's ever been. And so what we did as a business was I kind of said, all right, let's shut down Boost. Let's pause. Let's learn. That was kind of the MVP we've been running for a while. Let's make it bigger, better, faster, stronger, right? And then relaunch it in 2021, and we called it My Steady Mind, because that's ultimately what we're doing is we're training people to have a steady mind. Most people's minds are like this. That's where
Mhm.
burnout, emotional exhaustion, neural pathways are all over the place, and so we want to teach people how to steady it. And then we said, what markets do we want to work in? And the two that we chose were healthcare and law enforcement,
Mhm.
two that were getting hit the hardest by the pandemic and struggling the most with burnout, emotional exhaustion. And my ex-wife's an orthopedic trauma surgeon, so I had a front row seat for 11 years to watch the toll that industry took on her as a female orthopedic trauma surgeon, going through medical school, residency, trauma
Right.
fellowship in New York City, 4 years. And not once did she ever receive any kind of legitimate training to help her manage emotions, deal with the stress. And so I said, all right, we're going to help those two industries. And those are the two industries we mostly work in. And then real estate kind of fell in my lap a couple of
Yeah.
years ago. Again, I wasn't familiar with it. Excuse me. And a friend of mine kind of said, hey, there's a lot of stress in real estate. Maybe you guys can help them out. I said,
Mhm.
sure. How stressful can it be? And we
Yeah.
got in it, and I think it made those
Yeah.
other industries look about the same, if not even tame. I was like, holy shit, this is a stressful industry,
Yeah.
and
What's
it's
interesting?
all emotion, and if you
Yes.
don't understand emotion and emotional intelligence, you're screwed.
It's interesting
But
because, I think that's the sort of the idea in real estate attracts a certain type of person, right? It's like the salesperson and or somebody who's looking for second income or retirement income or whatever, right? Somebody who has some sort of inclination towards sales, the people that are going to make it anyway,
right,
right? Sales and freedom, right? It's like, hey, look, I can sell stuff and I don't need a boss. Basically, is sort of the thing that sort of drives people into the industry. What's interesting though with people is that, especially that have come from a sales background, they're not ready for the amount of emotion from buyers and sellers that they're going to experience because, and we were talking about this just a little bit before the episode started. It's like there's people in their normal state and there's people in their financial stress state, and those are two different people. I mean, it's almost like a different personality.
right,
A person that you would maybe understand as kind, friendly, conversational, all of a sudden gets this edge to them, right, in conversation. And you experienced
Yeah.
this several times in our eldest mortgages. But I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you said it earlier. It's all about mindset, and I feel like that's so true. I mean, you find somebody in a situation where it's kill and eat, and they're not killing anything, so they're not eating. They're constantly wanting to blame external factors, never their own actions or take any responsibility. So it's like, my split must be bad,
Yeah.
or I'm not getting enough training, or somebody's not telling me exactly what to do, or it's the market. It's the market. It's never about how I can approach things to better my own situation.
Right.
And I do feel like that's something that real estate specifically, or really any industry where you're killing and eating,
Yeah.
you're gonna
right.
experience that.
Yeah. And that's what we'll talk about, and we can kind of get into it because there's a lot of terms that get thrown out there in all industries, like mindset and all this. And
Mhm.
most people, like, the first thing I do is, because to your point, right, people that are struggling, most people, what holds us back, and we started talking about this a little earlier, the thing that limits us from our ultimate potential is subconscious self-sabotaging behavior,
Mhm. Right.
right? That's what caps us. And so all humans, and I'm a brain guy. I just help people understand, like, because everybody thinks they're unique and they're special, and no, you're not. You have a brain. A brain works a certain way, barring any defects. And so you just have to learn how your mind works and why you're where you're at and what's causing you to do what you do, and then you can fix it, right? And so the first thing I explain to people is what a mindset is. because
Mhm.
this is a question you can ask. There's a lot of people that claim to be mindset gurus and coaches and experts, and I'm always like, check the credentials first, because there's
Yeah.
just a lot of people out there that you don't want to hand your brain over to somebody that's just a motivational speaker or something
Right.
like that. Check the credentials, and that's why it's just important. So your mindset is a result of your brain set.
Mhm.
So you and the three of us and everybody listening right now has a mindset. And it's been formed over 30, 40, 50 years, however old you are. And it's formed through this neurological process called STIA. So this is all our
Mhm.
brain is doing every day: stimulus, thought, emotion, action. That's how neural pathways form. Stimulus creates a thought creates an emotion is literally energy in motion, and that drives action. So everything a human does or doesn't do is driven by emotion.
Mhm.
So as people have grown up over time, and people haven't been mental training their whole life, they don't have any awareness of this. And so your mindset is the anatomical physiological structure of your brain, which is these billions of neural pathways that have formed over time based on your perception of stimulus, whether it's a thought, a person, a family, whatever the case may be. And if enough neural pathways form, it creates a neural bundle. That neural
Mhm.
bundle locks that habit, that belief, that thing in place. So it's kind of automated. And then enough neural bundles create a neural network. And then
Mhm.
those neural networks make up your brain set. So that anatomical structure of your brain set produces your mindset. Does that make sense?
Yep.
It absolutely makes sense. Yeah.
Right. And so what we thought forever was people had, a brain. You can't change it. I can't change the anatomical structure of it. If somebody was just an asshole or mean or whatever, I could give them medication or talk therapy and make them less of one, but I'm not changing the structure of their brain. That's what we thought in our
Yeah.
country,
Right.
because we're based on logic and intuition, or I mean, we're based on, data and
Mhm.
logic, not
Right.
intuition. And so,
Right.
um, but what happened about 45 years ago, as technology in our country and imaging has improved and we've been able to study the brain more, what they found was that, and they did this by doing fMRIs on monks while they were meditating, they could see that the monk seated in meditation, and they were monitoring the brainwave and the pathways of the monk. They could see that the monk sitting there in meditation could proactively facilitate the process of neuroplasticity.
Mhm.
Neuroplasticity is our brain's ability to change, to rewire to be plastic. And that monk could sit there and could break bad neural pathways. It's called neural pruning, could break these bad neural pathways and then form new ones.
Mhm.
And everybody was like, holy shit, what is happening? This guy's literally changing his brain, sitting there not doing anything,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And so what that did was it let us know that, okay, wait a minute, we do have the ability to change or rewire our brains, right? It
Mhm.
just takes certain techniques and tactics and directed energy and inward reflection and contemplate and all these different things, and which Americans suck at, right?
Mhm.
By
Mhm.
design, because Americans go through a school system that's designed to eliminate divergent thinking and
Yep.
make it all about convergent thinking. So teaching
Mhm.
to the test, standardized testing, and I won't go down that rabbit hole, but just believe me, as a doctorate in education leadership, like our school systems don't produce the best outcomes mentally for people.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's why it's hard for us in our country. But long story short, that gave everybody hope. Wow, no matter what my mindset is, I can change it. And so that's what cognitive fitness does: is it teaches people how to learn how to proactively facilitate that process so you can identify these subconscious. So when we get up every day, every agent that's listening to this, when they get up every day, all their brain is doing is trying to form pathways, and their mindset is the result of the pathways that have formed up to this point.
Mhm.
And they're going about their day, and they have a conscious awareness and a subconscious awareness. And so we can do a lot of stupid stuff consciously, right? But it's
Right.
the subconscious stuff that holds us back. It's the, why can't I lose that weight? Why can't I stop drinking? Why can't I sell more houses, right? Why can't I do XYZ? And it's because we've got these pathways that have formed that lead us to do a lot of self-sabotaging things, like blame the market, blame the split, whatever the case may be, have transaction anxiety. And so all these things that just reinforce that subconscious behavior. And so you have to give people tools and tips and trainings to learn how to go down there, identify those things through inward reflection, through thought stopping techniques, biohacking techniques, whatever the case may be, and rewire it. Right.
Hmm.
Um, and ultimately, what this allows people to become is emotionally intelligent. And emotional intelligence as a skill, because what I teach and preach is performance based. This isn't a meditation class. This isn't a mindfulness course. And you've been through it, Brandon, right? This is
Yeah.
designed to increase performance, whether it's houses sold, like with Realty Group, we put hundreds of their agents through it and track their number of transactions sold over, the group that went through it versus the group that didn't. And we saw an average of 58% increase in
Wow.
transactions over a 1 year period. So it works.
Yeah.
Excuse me, it's on my throat. But so the ultimate superpower that we're helping people learn how to possess is emotional intelligence. And when most people out there hear the word emotionally or emotional intelligence, they think it just means somebody's nice, you know. Oh, he's nice, he's emotionally intelligent. That's not what it is. Emotional intelligence as a skill is broken down into four components. And these four components is what we're learning to master. And you can think about how important these components are in every interaction an agent may have, whether it's with potential clients or at home with their spouse and kids, right? Because that's what we're trying to help them too. I don't want them to just thrive and dominate the industry. I want them to also not just fall on the floor from exhaustion when they come home,
Right.
right? And it's emotional intelligence and understanding cognitive capacity and energy that lets you do that. So you want to master the first step of emotional intelligence is self-awareness. And most people out there don't have much self-awareness.
No, that's true. It's hard to self-evaluate.
Right. It's hard because we're not taught, and that's
Right.
why I have a lot of empathy and sympathy for people. Like, even the performance coach, I just want to be shaking people like, why can't you do this? But I have
Let
to
me just tell you what to
remember,
do. Yeah.
yeah, I have to remember, like, look, they didn't come up in a household. They didn't go through a
Yeah.
school system. They've never learned how to be reflective or
Right.
contemplative. It's just not natural and normal. So, you know, I'm like, okay, so I have to be a little gracious here and walk them
Yeah.
through it. And that's what our course does, is it kind of meets them where they're at, and shows them how to learn how to do it. So,
I will
so
say, as a coach, this sort of like process of like helping people move towards self-discovery can be very frustrating because you're right.
mhm,
You just want to tell them. You just want to say,
you
"Hey,
do right,
what's wrong with you?"
right,
But they have to figure it
and
out for themselves for it to
it,
really like
Yeah.
sink in.
right. And one of the things I say too, it's just because as a mindset guy, I just help people understand like mindsets that trip us up and cause us to do things that make things harder for us or whatever. When you have gone through the training and you have kind of evolved and you are reflective and you know how to do this, you know, it can be difficult to bring other people along because
Right.
you kind of forget about the process you went through to get there.
Hmm.
And I always say high performing people don't like low performing people, and low
Right.
performing people don't like high performing people.
Right.
There's just this disconnect. But if you're a high performer and you're trying to help low performing people, you kind of have to, part of your subconscious self sabotage is that, like, why can't you get this? Why do you not know
Yeah.
how to do it?
Yeah.
Right.
Like, come on, just
Exactly. Yeah.
figure it out. And you're like, oh shit, it took me 5 years to get here. I'm asking this guy to
Yeah.
do it in 15 minutes. Right. And
Uh-huh.
so we just have to have that. That's part of our own self awareness. So the first component is self awareness. And mostly what that means is, again, we said everything a human does is driven by an emotion, energy, and motion. And
Hmm.
so self awareness means I'm learning how to observe my emotions instead of evaluate my emotions.
Right.
Right. So I can observe my emotions in real time. If I'm anxious, if I'm scared, if I'm depressed, lonely, whatever emotion comes up,
Yeah.
they say things like name it to tame it, right? Hi, fear. Where'd you come from? Right. Or
Right.
hey, anxiety, what's going on? Instead of why am I so anxious? When you
Right.
evaluate, you're pouring gas on it. When you observe it, self awareness, I can observe my emotions. Then you can get to step two, which is self regulation. So self
Yeah.
awareness, then self regulation. And
Yeah.
self regulation is where you're using techniques and tactics like breath work, visualizations, mantras, affirmations, biohacking. And that's what cognitive fitness, that's what we teach. We give you all those tools so you
Right.
can learn how to regulate. And regulate basically just means getting out of sympathetic nervous system and into parasympathetic.
Right.
So go
Yes.
ahead.
Well, yeah. By the way, if you are kind of cluing in here, it's mysteadymind.com. Mysteadymind.com is where you can get information on Dr. Hickerson's program. Yeah, but one of the things that I, struggle with is that frustration with the emotion. You are sort of like I'm upset with myself for having these emotions, and it kind of creates this negative spiral where it's like, man, I wish I didn't feel this way. Why do I have to feel this way? But I think there's something to what you were just saying is like naming it, observing it versus being subject to that emotion.
Right.
So what would be a good, a good tip to help people sort of overcome the overwhelm of emotion or that sort of negative spiral of emotion?
Yeah, I mean, the first one was what you said. Like the first most important thing a person can have is self awareness. And that just
Yeah.
means I'm aware of my emotions, good or bad,
Yeah.
right? And it's natural for us again because one, we have a negativity bias, right? Our brain is just wired, so we're
Yeah.
naturally not looking for the good in things.
Hmm.
We're looking for the threat, and so it's just
Always. Yeah.
yeah, and that's not because people are bad, or it's not because it's just that our silly brains, right? All we're trying to do is outsmart our own psychology. The biggest problem in mental health is just simply that our brains have not evolved like society and technology has.
Hmm.
Our brains just can't keep up with the relentless onslaught of 24/7 stimulus and demand. But
Right.
we think it should,
Yeah.
and then we're like, why am I struggling? Everybody else is good. They're locked
Hmm.
in. No, they're not. Everybody's struggling, right?
Yes.
And so it's just understanding that it's a lot of these emotions are going to come up and whatever, and emotions are okay, they're not bad, especially as guys we're kind of no, 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 push them down, and that's
Hmm.
that old, I always say, that old cowboy mentality, like cowboys died when they're 50, right? Like
Yeah. Right.
that's not good, right?
Yeah.
And so it's the first thing you can do is just have the awareness that my emotions are going crazy right now, whatever it might be. I'm pissed, I'm anxious, because once you start becoming more emotionally intelligent and you start becoming more aware of your thoughts, you're going to notice, like, holy shit, I have a lot of negative thoughts.
Right. Right.
And I have a lot of negative self-talk, and that's
Yeah.
okay, right? Like I tell people, when you do this, give yourself some space and grace, because you're gonna have some. So you're becoming more comfortable with having awareness, and then the noting and labeling is a good technique, right? Like if I feel anxious, I can just say, "Oh, hey, anxiety, where'd you come from?" Right?
Hmm.
And then you have to regulate. Now take a BAMO breath, right? Like, what am
Right.
I doing? The awareness is the first piece instead of that evaluating. So I can name it to tame it. Name it to tame it's one thing you can do. And
Right.
then, so step one, self awareness. Step two, self regulation. So the regulation is really what you have to learn. That's if I get pissed off or anxious or sad or upset, the only thing that's really happening is I've perceived some stimulus as bad, whether
Mm.
it's this person I'm talking to, this bad email, this Facebook, whatever. And so the only thing that has happened is my sympathetic nervous system is engaged,
Hmm.
my fight or flight. That's just anytime I perceive something as bad, my sympathetic engages. And that's what makes us uncomfortable, right? I mean, I just want to
Yeah.
dive under my desk. I don't want to talk to this person about a contract. I just want to dive under the desk. And so we have to learn how to flip the switch from sympathetic to parasympathetic, the parachute. The
Hmm.
parasympathetic nervous system is what calms us down. And the BAMO breath, right? And I'll teach that here at the end, is just a technique that you can. So you're learning how to control your thoughts and your breath. Those are the
Hmm.
two things that control everything in your life. Your thoughts control your mind, your breath controls your nervous system. So thought technique is just that, naming it, noting it. That's a technique I can use to start to control my thoughts.
Hmm.
And the BAMO breath, which is breathe and move on, that's the first breathing technique we teach at My Steady Mind. That's the fastest way to flip the switch. So if I'm in sympathetic, meaning I'm pissed or I'm anxious or I'm scared or I'm worried, I need to flip the switch on my parasympathetic. And you do that through a 4-second inhalation through the nose, counting 1, 2, 3, 4, and we'll do one. And you have to breathe in through the nose. You got to breathe deep down into the lungs because you have to hit the diaphragm. The
Hmm.
diaphragm sends a signal to the vagus nerve to activate that parachute parasympathetic. And then you exhale through the mouth for a count of 4. So we'll just do one. And BAMO is a call to action, right?
Right.
Breathe and move on. We
Hmm.
don't want you just sitting there breathing. Breathe and get back in the game, get back in the fight, get back in the deal, whatever it is. But we'll do a BAMO breath, and I'll talk about the next two components and
Okay.
answering your question. So the BAMO breath, we're to sit and kind of relax. And I want you to see how this feels, because when I inhale, I'm activating sympathetic. When I exhale, I'm activating parasympathetic. So I don't know how stressed people are right now, but you should feel the transition between sympathetic and parasympathetic. So
Okay.
when I'm inhaling, you can feel yourself getting tight. When I
Hmm.
exhale and really open up the mouth and push it out, you can feel this like cool wave trickle over your body. That's your parasympathetic engaging. All right. So
Okay.
just get comfortable, close your eyes if you want, and I count to 4. Inhale through the nose, 2, 3, 4, open up the mouth and push it out. I should hear it. 2, 3, 4. Do another one on your own. You probably feel a little more relaxed right now than you just
Yeah,
did 8
for sure.
seconds ago,
Yeah.
right? And when you count, so if I got scary noise and language and thoughts and everything going on in my head and I think bammo, or I say bammo, and then I count, when I count, I shut that noise off. I can't count to 4 and still have all those negative thoughts. And so it's
Yeah.
like a quick little mental break, timeout, and it's activating your parasympathetic. So it's giving you back, putting you back into kind of feeling more empowered and less vulnerable. And now I can get back in the conversation. I can get back in the meeting, the cell, whatever's going on.
Right.
So
Right.
when you learn to master those first 2 steps, the Jedi stuff and is what you really want to master in emotional intelligence. Step 3 and 4. Step 3, situational awareness.
Mhm.
So as you start to become more aware of your thoughts, your emotions, you're going to start to be able to pick up and read other people's better. You're going to be able to read energy. You're going to be able to read other people's emotions, right?
Mhm.
Situational awareness. And so if I'm around a client or a prospect or a lender, whoever I'm dealing with, and I'm keeping myself regulated, I can see that they're not for whatever reason. I can see they're getting anxious or pissed or frustrated. And then step 4, situational regulation. So I know how to regulate the emotions of other people when they don't know how to increase the probability of whatever I want to happen happening.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And a quick technique I teach that people can start using because I want to make sure your listeners get some things they can use instantly is so I'm a human behavior guy, right? All human beings have our basic needs. We all need food, water, shelter,
Mhm.
but all humans also have their most basic want. And the one thing that all human beings out there want is to feel like they matter.
Mhm.
They just want to feel like they matter to someone or something, right? So 99% of the times when you're dealing with a client or a prospect or a spouse or a friend, and if they're pissed off and agitated and irritated and coming at you, it's because someone or something made that person feel like they don't matter,
Right.
right? And
Yeah.
whether that's your fault or not, when that person's coming at you, whether it's somebody pissing and moaning about whatever, you're
Yeah.
not cutting them off, you're not stopping them, you're not solving their problems, you're letting them do their thing, and you're
Uh-huh.
breathing, ammo breathing, keeping your energy regulated. And then a technique I use is I visualize. So cognitive fitness is using things like visualization, and I visualize that person as they're talking wearing a shirt that says "I matter" on it.
Mhm.
So I just see the words "I matter" on their chest. And it's
Mhm.
a reminder for me not to cut them off, not to come back. But when they get done saying or doing whatever it is, I just need to say or do something that makes them feel like they matter.
Yeah.
And it can be as simple as that. Just say, "Hey, I just want to let you know you matter. I'm sorry that that happened," or whatever the case may be. Now
Right.
the situation is back under control.
Yeah.
So that's an example of, the 4 components, how you're learning to manage it. And that can help overcome a lot of the things that agents sabotage and blow up in the multiple, uh, components of a deal because
Right.
everybody's got emotions all over the place. And you want to be the emotionally intelligent one in the room that can control and dictate what happens.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I tell agents a lot. It's like, "Hey, listen, you need to be the calm person in the room. You don't want to," and what a lot of agents will do is they'll attach to the emotional response of their clients, and then they'll take that with them to the next interaction with the realtor on the other side, whether beside
Right.
instead of understanding where they're coming from, filtering the emotion out of it and delivering the sort of, operative
Right.
parts of the argument. It's
Mm,
like, okay, well,
be the reason in the room.
yeah, yeah, exactly, be the
Right.
reason. And so, I do want to ask
And
you
that,
about, yeah, go ahead.
oh, no, yeah, I was just going to say you're 100% right. That comes back to that term limbic resonance, right? Like
Yeah,
I tell everybody, you introduce yourself with your energy before you open your mouth.
yeah,
And so that's why if I've got a client over here I'm about to talk to in this room or whatever, and I just got off a phone call where somebody was chewing me out over here and I'm pissed and I'm mad or whatever, like you need to, before you walk in that other room, take a couple Bamo breaths. You need to get yourself into parasympathetic because if you don't, you just go from this tough meeting or phone call right into that other room. Even if you walk in that room and you're smiling and like, "Hey, John, good
yeah,
to see you. How's your day?" John feels that internal energy of anxiousness, and that's what sends him signals and makes him on guard
yeah.
and feeling threatened. So you have to learn how to regulate your emotion before you enter a situation.
Yeah. Man, we have so much to talk about here, and I think we probably need to do a second episode with you if you're
Yeah,
open to it.
absolutely.
I think we could continue to go. I think if that's okay with you,
Mhm.
we can maybe continue in another week. But one of the things that I just want to ask in terms of as agents are sort of struggling with things and they're struggling with this new market and new emotions. Like I think people want to have like, can I ask you what are you seeing out there in terms of you're dealing with real estate agents, you're dealing with NASA, you're dealing with like what are the things that you're seeing in this post COVID world so the rest of us can feel normal.
That
You know
I
what I
think
mean?
I think that you just said the key word, right? Like nobody's alone in this.
Yeah,
Everybody's feeling it, right? And
yeah,
that's I work in multiple industries and everybody out there right now is stressed, exhausted, tired, worried, and we should be. We just went through a
yeah,
collective trauma, right?
yeah.
We should be. And so that's what I tell a lot of people is, "Hey, you're not screwed up. It's normal, you know."
Mhm.
Um, but the thing is, and that's what I tell a lot of people, like about what I do in cognitive fitness. Like I can explain this stuff to people, I can tell you, but the difference is who does something about it, right? If you just listen
Man,
to this
yeah,
episode and you're like, "Oh man, that was great," and then you don't change, you don't put in work, you don't do anything different, then nothing's going to happen,
right.
But it just takes that awareness. I tell people all the time too, like, be kind to yourself, give yourself space and grace. It is a stressful world, but it's okay. And what we're trying to do is start to see the opportunity in all this out there as opposed to the threat of it, right? And it's just like a little mind hack.
Yeah.
You might not believe it. You might think it's too overwhelming, but if you can just start there and start to say things like, well, what is the good in this? And write it down.
One of my
What's the
favorite
good?
questions, yeah.
Yeah.
One of my favorite questions is once you've had some time to sort of emotionally like settle, is what does this make possible? Right. And I think, a lot
Yeah.
of agents, you need to be asking yourself in this changing market, like, what does this make possible? Don't for you agents that have joined in this sort of COVID influx of agents or influx of real estate activity, I would challenge you because you need to shift, you need to change.
Mhm.
But there's a ton of possibility in that change if you're willing to do the work. And
Right.
so anyway,
Yeah.
I hate to cut
What
this short because I want to continue
Yeah.
to keep going.
Yeah, yeah. I say ending on that, one of the things, I
Yeah,
love one of my favorite sayings is there's two things that people hate: the way things are and change.
yeah, that's so fun.
Th-
That's exactly right.
This episode has been extremely interesting to me. So, especially the part you talked about where it's like, training versus treatment. So, Brandon told you I came from a healthcare background. What
Right.
he didn't tell you is I worked for the largest pure play behavioral healthcare company in the country, and it's the industry is hyper focused on treating acute situations with
Yeah.
patients.
Right.
And you just don't hear about this aspect of mental training to keep them
Mhm.
out of these acute situations that they find themselves in. So
Right.
I really want to do another episode, maybe two more, but
Yeah.
I thought this was incredible.
Yeah.
Um,
Agreed.
yeah, appreciate
And
your time.
let's connect. Let's connect separately too, Arlo. I'd love to just talk
Yeah,
more about your
absolutely.
background, and because that's a big industry where we're trying to educate people on. Is hey, there's this whole other world of training out there that's available. That and I do believe, and like that what we're doing is going to eventually become prescriptive. And I've already got doctors, and this has been through medical schools and stuff. So yeah, I'd love to just talk to you more about some of the healthcare related things.
Yeah,
But
at the very least, I'd love to connect you with the chief medical officer there. I think you
mhm.
guys would hit it off immediately. I mean, this episode was incredible. I
Yeah.
thought it was very good
Agreed.
content. So
Agreed.
appreciate your
Yeah,
time.
my pleasure.
Hey,
My
Dr.
pleasure.
Hickerson,
Well, yeah.
so much for your time, for your attention, for your presence here. We've gotten so much out of it. So we look forward to seeing you on the next episode, sir. Thank you so much.
Yep.